And welcome to the September 23rd meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Bankin. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Director Deerdorf, will you please read the purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you very much. Okay. We are going to skip the next item because our new Director of Human Resources was not able to be here this evening. So I will go ahead and move to the information discussion items and go ahead and read our statement regarding public comments, which follow each of our discussion items as well as our public forum. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And our first discussion item tonight is the Chartwell's Food Service Scratch Meals. Come on up, Jackie.
I think everybody knows Jackie Janning. She's our food service director from Chartwell's.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight and even set up a little taste testing for you guys today. I hope most of you had a chance to try a little bit of everything and enjoyed it. And along with the tasting, another thing really was just to discuss really our purpose for starting out the school year with just less processed items. So a goal of ours was to have at least a minimum of 2 more homemade items per week for really across the district. So today's items, for example, were the stromboli grinder and the quesadilla. So that kind of included that less processed. So really, since August, they really were perceived very well. And even with, for example, that casserole, students were a little more hesitant to try it. However, with a little bit of taste testing during service, they were like, I will try that next time. And it was so nice to see them very excited to try it out. So we'll continue it for our October menu and going forward. Related to those items too, on Friday, a parent and student survey was sent out for menu ideas and just to get really good feedback to really increase our student perception and parent perception of our meals. So in about 2 weeks, I'll be excited to be able to review those and see how we can really implement those for the school year going forward. Some other items too that we had homemade and going forward are, for example, at the high school and middle school, we did homemade enchiladas, hummus, veggies, and flatbread for some vegetarian options, homemade black bean burgers, homemade carnitas. We're continuing our sloppy joe items, and really just, again, going to try and get that feedback and really increase that amount of less processed for our students. So those were, again, on some of our scratch items. Some other exciting things for food service too are, like on Friday we had the chance to have local sweet corn from Maydell. So we had that across the schools and the students absolutely loved it. Next month we'll do local apples from Iowa State. So we'll have that as well as squash. So that'll be on the menu in October, And I think last but not least, I'll touch base on our washables throughout the school year. So we did incorporate them at the very start, and they have been, there's a little bit of transition for the custodians and students and staff, but it's really gone well, and I'm really glad we made that transition to less paper products. So, and that is kind of my update. So thank you.
Any questions for Jackie?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to just make a comment and thank you and Chartwell's for the efforts. I know we've had conversation about wanting to see, some different items in the menu, and I just appreciate how responsive Chartwell's has been. As a parent, I did receive and complete the survey, and I appreciate the effort that clearly is going into asking the community what they want and then providing it. And I think the extra step of, not only making a variety of from-scratch meals, but also taking the extra step to use the locally sourced produce and vegetables is just really appreciated. And I just want to say how much I appreciate the work that you're clearly putting into meeting what the district is asking you to do. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I also want to thank you for responding to the students, because it was really the students that came forward and asked you to go to more washables, as you just referred to it, and reducing the use of plastics and papers and such. So thank you again for listening to them and being responsive to that. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing some of your items with us this evening prior to the board meeting. Any comments from the public on the Chartwell food service update? Seeing none, we'll move to our next item, school-based enterprise and the creation of an enterprise fund. Vicki Hales and Jeff Hawkins.
Wherever you're comfortable. Dance, thank you.
That's kind of weird.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with the board. Our district is interested in beginning student enterprise funds, which are student-run businesses that can run concurrent with our CTE programming. The cut to the chase of the conversation is that in order to do so, we need to have an appropriate accounting fund. And as you would be aware, policy and state code would say that if a new fund is going to be opened up, then the board must approve that new fund. But we would be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have about the enterprise funds themselves. What are we intending to do with those enterprise funds? Or we could attempt to answer questions also about that funding process.
What risks are there, I guess? So give an example, I guess, of a student-run fund and how would that be managed? I'm thinking about how do you deal with the resources that come in, how to make sure we don't have any embezzlement and all those other types of things. So I guess more of the operational aspect of the fund. How does that work?
Sure. We will need to train staff sponsors as well as students on appropriate cash handling procedures. There will need to be a check and balance system, as we would for any kind of cash handling process, in order to make sure that cash is accounted for and deposited and managed in the right way. I believe we can train our staff and our students with some simplicity, some succinct processes in order to ensure that our cash is handled in the manner that it should be. Did you also ask for an example of what that fund or what that enterprise might be?
Yeah, so what would a student do, I guess, to try to generate?
Sure. Do you want to talk specifically about the ones that are considered or being planned for now, Vicki?
Yeah, so we're in the process of setting up for an apparel type of store, retail, specifically using the screen printer that we purchased with Perkin funds last year. We'll be doing that. We have a sublimation printer, which would be similar types of items, some accessories. Moving forward, we have some plans per funding source for a coffee shop down the road.
So students in our entrepreneurship class who are receiving a curriculum and their standards point them towards these type of opportunities would have that curriculum supplemented by participation in these enterprise funds, or enterprise businesses, if you will.
So is there any risk to the district financially?
So this fund will be set up in Fund 68 because we don't have any other funds. So the only other enterprise fund that we have in the district is the School Nutrition Fund. So an enterprise fund is operated on full accrual versus modified accrual, which we have. There won't be any capitalized assets because we won't have any assets that belong to the enterprise that are more than $5,000 because the Perkins screen printing already belongs to the district as part of the Perkins program. It's distinct from a student activity fund where you might see like the DECA Club or the Future Farmers of America. Those are clubs. Those are co-curricular. They're intended to go alongside of the curriculum but not be part of the curriculum. An enterprise is supposed to be part of the curriculum, but it's got to be accounted for separately. Iowa, and Jenny will tell you, we're kind of slow to get into these. The most common one that has been in place in Iowa, but it kind of fizzled out during the housing crisis, was student-built homes. And those fizzled out because they couldn't get the houses sold, and then the district was out that money for a long time on those homes. These are much more liquid enterprises that they're considering, and that's what most of the school districts, that there are a few around us that have them. They're more these quick turnarounds like coffee sales or the apparel sales, so there won't be a huge investment, but it is a requirement of the fund that it be self-sufficient. The general fund cannot supplement it, so it's operated that way.
How's it initially capitalized then?
Well, that's one of the things with it being part of the curriculum, is the curriculum can buy some of the materials through the curriculum, because they're not only developing, if I'm stealing your thunder, interrupt me, but they're developing the business plan and how to run the business in class, but they're also developing some of the product in class, learning how to operate those machines, and learning how to do that. So some of that, I think the initial product will come from the class, and then as we expand it, and other students that don't have to just be in your classes, right? They can be from the DECA Club, or things can also participate. Am I right? No?
Currently, it'll be just the ones who are in
Right,
our
but
classes.
eventually, they
potentially,
might
yeah.
be making some of those products
Yes.
outside of class, and hopefully they've made some sales then to start funding those.
So in the screen printing example, part of the curriculum investment would be actually buying the t-shirts to then actually go through the development process.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, for example, the screen printer itself was capitalized or purchased initially with Perkins funds. Those are permissible funds to use for this purpose. We will again have Perkins funds that we can consider using this way, but whether it's general funds that would be associated with the curriculum, PEPL funds, Perkins funds, those would all be permissible funding sources. We would just need to decide what's the most appropriate funding source.
I love the concept. I think it's great to give our kids real-world examples of how to start a business, how to operate it, and deal with a lot of those great, hard, tangible skills that they'll have out in the environment. So very, very much applaud you guys to move this forward.
Yeah. And again, to emphasize, this is a really a push from the state of Iowa right now in order to prepare students for that college and career-ready component of that real business-like aspect of what they'll encounter as they leave high school.
So then, after you get it capitalized and you're starting, what's the situation with retained earnings? I mean, are you going to maintain retained earnings from year to year, or is it meant to break even each year? How will it financially move forward? What's the goal there?
So the fund has to be self-sufficient, but we're not really allowed to make a profit as a school district. So the product has to be sold at just enough to cover the cost plus cash flow for additional product to continue the business. So while there will be a small fund balance, it shouldn't be something that accumulates to a great amount, because that means that we're actually making a profit on the product, which we're not in. That's not the intent of the entire program. But it does need to be solvent enough that the fund balance isn't trying to draw from the general fund.
So if you needed to get any other capital equipment, like for the coffee shop or something, would it be permissible then to use some of the funds from those proceeds?
So
to
we've
do
been
that?
looking at, so my concern is that it be under our capitalization level of $5,000, because that's when I have to account for it within the enterprise fund. So none of the coffee machines are over that. Those could be funded from the general fund, but we've also, I think, had some conversations initially with Jerry about having those there over the $500 that's eligible for PEPL. So for instance, in the nutrition fund, the capitalization level by law is $300. So if PEPL buys something for nutrition, I have to do a contributed capital entry to the enterprise fund. But in this case, where our district capitalization level is $5,000, I won't have to do those entries. So the fund won't actually own any equipment. The district
Okay.
will.
Okay.
typically these programs are expensive to get started. So that's a great question. But once they're started, that equipment cost, you're just maintaining it and buying supplies. Very, very common, these marketing and different classes that go forward and do these enterprises. And like we've already said, it's very necessary that we begin to give kids these experiences so that they can be competitive as they go and have resumes and those types of things, that they've been given that opportunity to experience some of those. Another common one is often your horticulture classes or that type of thing, that they plant their baskets and their different things, and then they sell them as part of the class. They sell them only to be able to buy the supplies they need for the following year, and it's part of the class because they're learning how to grow. So, yeah.
Will you be selling to only the students, or will you be selling to the community as well?
The primary market is students and staff. We don't intend to step on the toes of our current booster store in the school store. That was not the intention at all.
Actually, that is one of the things within, if you read the guidance on the DE website, that we're not supposed to compete with private entities as a school district either.
The one thing I would encourage, though, is I think if we go out into the market, we might have some good partnerships. And a lot of times as businesses are replacing items, there could be a way for us to grab on some pieces that would help support what you're hoping to achieve. So I think reaching out to the community would be a good option, too.
There's been some reach out to the community and partnering in the planning stages. I think there's been some conversation with a local coffee shop about some of the processes that we might use, some of the equipment that they would recommend, and things like that. So the partnering has occurred on the front end. I appreciate the suggestion about the potential partnering on the back end or the sales end of it as well.
Any other questions?
So under the laws affecting me, the school board has to approve the creation of this fund. So that will come back to the board meeting at the next board meeting.
Well, thank you for all of your efforts on this and providing yet some additional opportunities for our students. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the public on the school-based, or comments from the public on the school-based enterprise and creation of the enterprise fund? You can go ahead and come up to the microphone. And just as a reminder, I said question, but we won't answer any of the questions, but you can give them to us. So
I was just wondering, I think it's a great program, and I was just wondering how they're going to measure success or impact, whether it's successful or not in the near or medium future.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next discussion item, which is the 2019-22 Iowa Net High contract.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you tonight. As you may know, Net High is a third-party organization that the district partners with in order to refer some students who are experiencing some struggles or difficulties in our comprehensive high school finishing and completing their diploma. And this organization works with us in order to ensure that Ames High School students finish with an Ames High School diploma, but do so in a very individualized way as they work with them to accomplish our curriculum and our standards, but again, maybe not inside the comprehensive high school and done in, again, an individualized way. We have a contract, or had a contract with them that has recently expired, and in order to continue to utilize those services, we need to re-engage in that contract. So I've put before you for discussion tonight a contract that would allow us to continue to engage in that partnership.
Are there any changes of this contract with the one that we've had in the past? Significant changes?
No.
Okay. Any questions?
And this extends the contract for how long, 1 year or several?
I think it is several years. It extends through June 30th of 2022 is the length of the contract. Thank you.
Do you know, as far as utilization, I mean, in the past, I could kind of recall how many we had, but do you know offhand how many kids we had go through the program and graduate?
Yes, sir. We've allowed ourselves to send 10 students each year previously to this service. And I can tell you that I would need to do a little digging our specific graduation rate. When we met with Net High to discuss that relationship, their founder indicated that their overall graduation rate is around 80%, but I'd have to do some digging into our history to know whether our students are graduating at that same graduation rate. I will tell you that there was some discussion this year about whether 10 is the right number or whether we have more than 10 students that would benefit from that service. And so currently there are more than 10 students that would benefit from that service. And so we would want to expand that.
I just really compliment the district for finding out how they can best serve all kids, because some kids, as you suggest, don't operate well in that structured environment, and I feel some of the kids would be left behind without a diploma should we didn't have this program. So fully support this going forward, and I think it's great you're thinking about trying how to expand it to beyond 10 kids.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think our goal is to make sure that as we move forward, we have our multi-tiered system of support built in a way that we don't have to send students out of our schools. And so we are working on that, and we'll continue to work on that because that is the goal. We want to make sure that our system can meet the needs of students, knowing that not always does the traditional way work for everyone, but what are the ways that we can make sure that our system is one that can include and embrace all students. So that's a discussion that we're continuing to have and to plan around. Without that in place, unfortunately, we need to send more students there because we have not put into place that MTSS model. And so it's not the position we want to be in. We want to make sure that that number doesn't increase, but really decreases. And that's our goal as we move forward with building that multi-tiered system of support and identifying where the gaps and needs are.
So does the contract that we'd be voting to put in place allow for you to easily go beyond the 10?
Yes, it
In a
does.
structured way?
Yes, it does. Yeah, what I appreciate about the contract is that it does allow us to go beyond the 10, as Superintendent Reisner indicated. We need that now. I too am hopeful to help create a robust continuum of services to where we internally can take care of those needs, and the contract would not indicate that we have to send 10 students to them either down the road when that more robust MTSS process is in place.
And just, sorry to belabor this, but putting on that lens of equity, and what we continue to learn and grow around is this concept of push out. And so it's one of those practices, just to be very direct and honest, how much of it is a push out by the system and the practices and policies that we have in place, that we're actually, this is the last step for students and we're kind of doing that push out. So those are tough discussions to have, but I want to be sure that I'm being an example for our leaders, in that it's okay to recognize that we may have some of that going on and we need to eliminate it, and we need to find the best routes for being an inclusive environment. So
in the past, our community has talked about alternative schools, and I'm curious, Superintendent Reisner, as you look forward, how will this discussion evolve, whether it's more MTSS, pulling in alternative schools, this type of program? How do you see this over the next few years playing out?
Well, I'm a fan of alternative schools because I think that the one-size-fits-all doesn't apply, and we have families that we have students that have to work to help support their families or have other things that they have to do. And in addition to that, some transition of students back into the system who may have been in mental health facilities or rehab facilities that really need to be slowly brought back into the system for their own growth. So we are having those discussions. Those would be part of that MTSS model and system of support that we would provide for kids. Usually those kids that are at your alternative schools are on an individualized plan. So we work with them somewhat like Net High does, but it's within our system versus, and I know that Director Hawkins has a lot of experience with
Much experience, yeah.
alternative settings and how that looks, so.
Yep. Yeah, anecdotally, I would say within my previous 8 years, I sent less than a handful of students to a third-party group like this, but because there was that continuum of services that could handle it internally. So if that is the direction of the board and the superintendent, I would be very excited to help build that here. Again, appreciate that there is a place for our students now, and appreciate that there may be students that this would be appropriate for down the road as well, but I would be interested in that continuum of services growing and developing.
Do you know how these students who go to Net High are counted in our data?
Let me make sure I understand your question. Our enrollment data or
No,
in
our educational outcome data.
Not off the top of my head, and so I wouldn't want to answer flippantly, but I'd be more than happy to bring that information back for the decision meeting.
I think that would be great. I guess what I'm thinking is, especially after hearing this conversation, and I really appreciate it, and I appreciate Superintendent Reisner's conversation about push out. We completed the equity report. I don't know if you had a chance to read it yet. I'm going to get you a copy.
I have a copy. Since our last conversation, I've been getting a copy.
But I don't know if those students were even captured in those data. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But it would be, I think, part of what we're figuring out is how we get our data act together and what we're tracking and what we're not tracking. And so it may be that these are students that we simply aren't tracking, right? Like they're pushed out and then they drop off the face of the earth, right? How are they doing? Who's in this group? Like, I think that would just be interesting, especially if we are going to have equity remain as our number one priority, that we're, and we think about the data dashboard, that we are just ensure that we're not missing these students and their experience.
Sure. What I can tell you is that we get a monthly report from Net High about those students who are or are not showing up for their meetings, participating in the program, advancing in their coursework. And so from an attendance and a progression standpoint, we have data, but I think you may be asking me about more than that. And so I'll dig in to see if we have outcome-based data that we would be capturing for those students as well.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
So I'm just looking through the contract for this. You might know offhand. This doesn't tie us to any sort of long-term liability if we did change path in how we wanted to serve these students.
Correct. And we're not obligated to send students to them. We have the opportunity to send students and to utilize their service through the contract.
Thank you very much for the
Thank you very
information.
much.
Appreciate it. Any comments from the public on the Iowa Net High contract? Seeing none, go ahead, Chris, on the June, July, and August 2019 financial reports.
Good evening. So as you know, our fiscal year ends June 30th, but as in my world, it doesn't really end until August 31st, which is the end of our accrual process. Our state reports are due September 15th, and so I am ready to share the results of fiscal year 19 with you, and then just a couple of changes to fiscal year 20. We'll start with the fund balance. The district's general fund balance was $7.1 million at the end of fiscal year 19. The unreserved undesignated portion of that was $5.7 million. That means that's the amount that we do not hold in restricted grants. The fund balance reserve was 12.6% and the solvency ratio was 9.6. If you recall, last year we started on a multi-year plan to increase our fund balance and our percentages of our reserves in order to try to regain some of our bond rating. They very much look at our solvency ratio. The prior year, our fund balance reserve was 6.2%, so it went from 6.2 to 12.6, and our solvency ratio was 3.7 and went to 9.6. So we are getting closer to where we would like to be, but we will still continue to work with our financial advisor, Tim Oswald, to make sure that we're continuing to levy that cash reserve to keep that cash reserve balance up where it needs to be for bonding. And that's important, especially now with all the bonds that we're going to be issuing for the high school. As far as the statutory budget, we did exceed the statutory budget in 2 control areas. Instruction was 101.2% of amended expenditures, and support services were 100.4%. I thought I had enough budget authority. I did amend up a little bit. The main thing that caught me, I believe, was, if you recall, we made a decision very late in May to buy the Lucy Calkin materials, and that was about $600,000, and I'm about $250 over. So I had already published my amendment when that was brought to the board. So I think another thing that contributed to that, and it's not good, bad, or indifferent, but as you'll see later in the meeting, our special ed deficit increased significantly as well because we're serving a lot more special ed students. So I think those were the things that contribute. I think in support services, we had a lot of late resignations of employees, and we had some vacation payouts that I wasn't anticipating. I accrue vacation to our district-wide statements, but it only hits our fund statements and our budget when we actually pay the vacation out. So for instance, I had vacation accrued at the end of the year. That goes into the long-term debt fund, but it doesn't hit our budget or our expenditures unless you would pay me that vacation out. So while those two were exceeded, our total budget was not exceeded, and we were at 93.6% of expenditures. So while I aim not to exceed those control areas, sometimes it happens, and we'll endeavor not to have that happen in the future. I have presented to you the cash balances. You're actually getting those every month now. But the only thing in statute that I'm actually required to settle with you is the cash balances. So statute is not kept up with modern day accounting because the cash balance doesn't really mean anything. It's simply the amount of cash we had on hand June 30th, but we had teacher payrolls in July and August that bring that fund balance down. So if you look at cash in the general fund, we had almost $12 million of cash on hand where our fund balance was just over $7 million. So while I present that because that is what's still required by statute, please keep in mind that the fund balance is a much more accurate representation of where we are financially. We ended up with negative lunch balances at $73.6 million, or $73,600. It's up $22,000 from the beginning of the year. When we get to the August, you'll see that that actually came down a little bit, so we're still within the policy guidelines. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the June 30th financial before I move to August.
You mentioned special ed. Where, on which page is that?
It's not reflected in the financial report. It's going to be on an action item at the end.
Okay.
So at the end of the year, I have 3 different reports. I have the certified annual report of what we like to call the CAR. I have the special ed supplement to the CAR, which is the SES, and then the annual transportation report. Those 3 all feed into each other, and so transportation feeds into SES, and the CAR feeds into SES. So that deficit is showing up on that action item. I have the the special ed balance on that action item.
Okay. I appreciate the work Darcy's done over the years. You're doing a great job managing that program. I'm just curious how sustainable it is. Like, will the board and the school district need to make a change with all the open enrollments? And I guess long-term, is it going to be an issue that we need to address, and that really the time element of that?
I think one thing that'll help going forward as well, just in terms of, and this is not quite related to special ed, but we'll come back to that later on. But Forecast 5 gives us beautiful reports. So this gives us like the snapshot, but we'll be able to see through Forecast 5 great displays on the history of all these accounts, rather than having Chris just tell us, because it's hard for me to follow that. I need the visual, very much need the visual. And so we have that ability right now with our new system, Forecast 5, and Chris and I are going to a training on that. So I'm excited for you to be able to have that comprehensive look. And you'll get monthly reports that'll be really nice for you to follow, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the special ed deficit and some thoughts I have around that, and how we can bring that down maybe in the future.
Thank you.
So I have, last week, after the financial reports were done, I did send Forecast 5, my CAR file. I've sent them the other things they've requested. As soon as Carol runs payroll next Monday, she'll be able to encumber payroll. I have the line item budget entered except for salary and benefits, which is significant in the general fund, but I have to wait until that encumbrance so I get the right amount in each account. So we've had a lot of movement this year, so I want to make sure that they're in the right accounts, and then I'll send that to Forecast 5. We've had training on 5-Site, which is the financial side of Forecast 5 that compares certain, not everything, but certain statistics with other school districts, so we can create graphics to show where we line up with other districts. That's the 5-Site section of it. The Forecast 5 then is going to replace the model that we were using the last couple of years that Tim Oswald had for us on forecasting. So like Jenny said, we are going to a training the second week of October on
9th
that.
and 10th.
And I've also been in conversations with Laura and Gary on that to get some individual training for me on it. So once we get all those pieces loaded in, I kind of anticipate we'll have one more financial report in this format, and then we'll start rolling out the Forecast 5. Any more questions on June? Okay, I'm going to skip to August. If you happen to look through the financials on July and August, you'll notice that really not much happens in July and August in the district. It's very, very little bit of what we spend or collect in July and August ends up in New Year, and almost all ends up in Old Year. So that's why I spend more time on June 30th. However, I do always try to highlight the few changes that the state makes after they get our budget. One of the things this year that we were notified this summer, might have been late May, Anthony can remind me on timing, late May or June, we were notified that statewide the Title I allocations had been reduced. Because of the free and reduced percentages going down statewide, the state is not getting as much Title I money. Our reduction is $52,300. We're going to have to work to determine how we're going to account for that this year. We also did not have any carryover for the first time in a long time, so the Title I program is going to be pushed this year. There's always a slight adjustment to the instructional support levy, and it was very slight this year. So the amount that the aid and levy worksheet predicted was $305 less than what we're actually going to get. So property taxes have been increased by $305 because of the instructional support program, and then there was a slight change to the C&I replacement as well, which increased the additional levy by $172. So property taxes have increased $477. And because of that, our tax rate went from 14.34126 to 14.34142. Might see a couple pennies difference on your tax bill because of that. And then, as always, there is still a statewide reduction in the AEA funding. And while that's an in and out of our budget and doesn't really affect our budget, it does impact the agency, and it could impact the services we receive from them. So any questions on July or August? All right.
Thank you, Chris.
Oops.
Any comments from the public on the June, July, and August 2019 financial reports? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to policies for discussion.
There's a series of policies here. Everybody's reviewed them. Jenny can talk to it a little bit possibly, but effectively all of these are renumbering or adjustment of required policies that either we already had that was numbered a different way, or that we needed to bring in that are required for various legal or administrative reasons. So although it looks like there's a lot of policy changes going on here, really there's not much in the way of change. It's just getting the house in order a little bit. And this is probably the first in a series of ones like this that you'll get. One thing to note, well, two things to note. We have down here in the discussion at the last policy committee meeting, there was basically an identified issue where when superintendent and also when JD maybe need to just change some policy numbering or cross-referencing or deal with something that doesn't really adjust any concrete aspect of the policy, it's just a bookkeeping item, that they still would have to go through the normal process. We'd recommend they bring to the board and just have a discussion of would we be willing to allow that type of correction to be done at the staff level.
So for example, there may be like two policies under the same number, or a policy under the number and under a lettering system, or a policy that should be numbered something that's not under that, it's under something else. So just in terms of cleaning up the numbering, it doesn't impact the policy, it's just the number or the letter. Going away from the lettering to the numbering, and then one policy per number. So some of those things for us to just be able to go ahead and do that without bringing the policy to the board.
And then do you want to comment on the service you found through IASB?
I do. But could I just back up a teeny bit and go to the policies that are in there around evaluation? So, as you know, it was, evaluation was something that we were prohibited from negotiations around. So evaluation will move to a handbook versus in the contract. One of the things, our evaluation process was pretty clumsy. I just came up with that word, clumsy, because that's how it felt as you walk through it, really pretty clumsy. And so what we have done is taken the IASB's just very short, brief policy that most school districts have, and then you develop, as the district, we develop the administrative rules portion, which is how we go about it. And so that's what we're looking at here for all of our groups. So the administrators, the employees, and the classified. So taking the ISB legally vetted language for the policy portion, and then we are working to develop the actual administrative rule portion. That doesn't change. I mean, there's legal requirements around the dates and all of that, so it really doesn't change that a whole lot. But I wanted to point that out because I know sometimes people see evaluation and think, wait, what does that mean? And then, Ellen, you asked me about...
the IASB service we found that could help out.
So we found an IASB part on their website that actually takes our policies and lays them out with IASB's policies and gives us recommendations on, one, what ones need to be updated ASAP, and what ones are missing. So we are going to go ahead and move forward with that. When I contacted IASB, they are a few months out from being able to take us on, but they will do that. When they do, we'll bring that to the board and have a pretty clean copy of what we need to look at first. So, but I appreciate the policy committee. We've done a lot of work. Just looking back over a year where we've been and where we've come, an incredible cleanup has happened. So thank you for the work that you both have put in with that committee.
Any questions, comments from the board for?
I just want to add that, I agree that the idea of giving the administration the power to just change the numbers would be really helpful. That's sometimes a lot of what we do in the meetings is figure out why do we have two policy number 17s. And so it's frustrating and it kind of bogs down the system. But I want to just be clear to the community, because it was something I had to learn when I got on the board, is that the policies are really in some ways in two pieces. So the policies that you see here are, when we try to align them with the IASB policy, are really kind of more bare bones. And then the administrative rules, which are written by the district, are really where the kind of the meat of the policy live. And so that's kind of not a part that the board has a role in. Our job is to kind of really just set the platform that will allow for the administrative rules to be written. I say that all to say that I am, in particular, I'm looking very forward to what the administrative rules say about evaluation. I know that as we went through the whole conversation about equity and that we've had all the speakers in and the critical consciousness training, the real important mechanism was accountability. And our community has been asking for accountability, and it's, every expert that we've spoken to has said, this is the way you get accountability is through the evaluation process. So I will be looking very forward to what the district has in line for accountability around the equity work we've been doing through the evaluation process.
Any other comments? Thank you for all of the work. We appreciate and we know that we have come far. We still have a lot of work to do, but certainly you're moving in that direction, so thank you. Any comments from the community on policies for discussion? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to the next item, which is the new high school bid issuance number 2, elevator bid error.
Thank you. Well, we had a little snag with the high school project. This is the first one, but it's pretty minor, maybe in the big scheme of things. But unfortunately, what happens sometimes during the bidding process is a bidder makes an error. And they went ahead and submitted the bid. And once they found their error, then they notified Story, our construction manager. That happened to be in between when the agenda item was published and Monday. So it happened Friday before the school board meeting. And so we decided not to be able to create a whole lot of havoc. They basically notified Story that there was a potential error in their bid, but they didn't give any direction as far as what they were gonna do. So at that point in time, the contractor then has the ability to withdraw their bid or to honor their bid. So that was the question that needed to be answered. So Story continued to work with the contractor to see what their option or what option they were going to select. So the contractor decided that they would not be able to go through with the bid. The base bid for the elevators and lifts that we received was about $300,000 or $400,000. And the amount of the error that they made in submitting their bid amounts to about $100,000. So it's a significant amount. It's something that they weren't able to really honor and maintain their business. So It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it does, so we wanted to make sure that we were doing the right thing, so we passed this information on to legal to be able to get some advice. And legal gave us some advice on that. Basically, it's unconscionable, I think is the word that was used, for us to be able to force somebody into a bad contract. And so based on that and based on the circumstances we have, we really want to recommend the right thing to do is to reject the bids and then take it out and rebid it. The advantage to be of that is that we have the opportunity to possibly get additional bids so we can get some more competition, but we are also going to be able to get into a situation where we can engage with the contractor under good conditions rather than having to try and make up his loss. So I think the best thing is that we need to do, and what we'll want to recommend to bring forward to the next school board meeting, is we reject the bid because we've already accepted the elevator bid. So we need to undo that in order to move forward, and then direct the architect to go ahead and proceed with changing the dates, and we'll rebid the elevator work. And we can do that in a pretty timely basis, and I've set that time frame down in the board agenda form. So I'd like to ask if there's any questions.
Sure. So originally, how many bids were there for the elevator work?
There was one.
Okay.
So that's
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Yeah.
But do you anticipate letting out the new bids that we might get more than one?
We hope to. There was
Okay.
there was other bidders that were interested, and for circumstances they weren't able to get their bid submitted. So we're
Okay.
going to go out and re-engage the market and hopefully get a couple more bids. I think at least one.
That'd be good. That'd be good.
Yep.
Okay.
Any questions for Jerry or comments?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your work on that, Jerry. We'll look forward to seeing that as an action item on October 7th. Any comments from the community on the new high school bid issuance number 2 elevator bid error? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to the new high school owner's representative designation and change approval thresholds.
All right, couple things that we wanted to do, and that we worked with the facilities committee to be able to help create some greater understanding with this is currently the contract is situated such that the owner's direct representative is the superintendent. So we wanted to broaden that so we didn't have all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak. And so we wanted to designate the director of facilities, that would be me, as an additional owner's representative. I have a little bit more flexibility and ability to be involved in the project and to be able to go out and see things that are actually occurring when as we move forward with the construction. In addition to that, then we wanted to establish some change order thresholds, change order approval thresholds. And by doing that, the purpose for doing that.
We're trying to get it up on the screen, sorry.
Oh. I could plug in.
There we go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Chris.
So I'm not sure where you're at. Kind of lost track.
Did
where
we
I
throw you
was.
off, Jerry?
Sorry, you were on a great roll.
Yeah. I just had to rewind.
So in other words, to be able to identify an additional owner's representative, we have the ability then, both of us have the ability then to be able to visit the site as necessary and to be able to respond to the dynamics and the changing conditions of construction. With the change order thresholds, we also wanted to be able to get some ability to be able to respond to timely type of questions that come up during the construction. It's a complex project, there's a lot going on, and we need to be able to, in order to be able to be successful, we want to be able to keep the construction moving along. So if there's issues that come up that need to be addressed and provide immediate authorization, we tried to establish a couple levels or thresholds. The first one being a $5,000 limit, and that allows Story Construction Company to authorize proceeding with the work. Something like that could be if they're doing an excavation and they encounter some unsuitable soils, a wet spot, then we can authorize them to over-excavate that and bring in 5 dump trucks loads of rock to be able to stabilize that. That allows the construction to be able to continue. The alternative on the other opposite end of the scale would be stop the work, identify the change, get pricing, and then take it through the approval process, and then take it to the school board meeting, once for discussion, once for approval, which could really stretch the project out. That's kind of a small example, but maybe a little bit exaggerated, but that really gives a good feel for the amount of time it could possibly take, which would result in a project delay, additional costs, and not being able to open the school on time. That's the biggest goal. So the first threshold is $5,000 for Story Construction. We want to authorize $25,000 for Director of Facilities, that would be me, and then $50,000 threshold for the superintendent. And now these aren't just arbitrary changes. These would be material, or anything that's not a material change. If there's something significant, we want to be able to bring that to the Facilities Committee for discussion and explanation, and then bring that to the school board. Something like that could be if we wanted to add a wing onto the building, or if we wanted to change a material that would have an increase in cost. Those are type of things that primarily we would have a little bit more time to be able to respond to them without affecting the timeline of the project.
The Facilities Committee had a lengthy discussion about this over a couple different meetings, and it really, as Jerry said, expedites the process to help us move this forward. So again, when we're doing a $140 million project, $5,000 in authorization is pretty minimal. And so again, I appreciate Story's recommendation. Both Story and OPN were supportive of this proposal, and it allows us to move it forward. So I'm supportive of doing it.
One other thing we discussed at length in the Facilities Committee was really the numbers that are there, those limits. That was based off recommendations from Story from previous projects of this type of scope as to where they see it being reasonable that these type of issues are going to come up. Because as you see in the footnote, not only is it timely, but it's timely where it's something where if you stopped, it's going to cost more money than it would have cost to spend. And really they think the vast majority of these are going to be covered below the 25,000, and anything that gets up towards the 50 is going to be very, very rare. And all of them will still come back, as it said, to the school board in the next meeting as something that we'll see and we'll understand, and we can provide feedback and adjust these limits if we find that we don't like the way they're being used.
Yeah, I think the recommendations from the Facilities Committee was a really good coverage of this, and the recommendation from Story to go forward with this to keep the project moving forward. Most of those will, from my experience in dealing with some of these things, and not only schools but also on a city council, would fall into that 25 to 50 would be more commonly that it would fall into the under 25, and yeah, the board's going to see it, and if things become questionable, then the board will be able to address it accordingly. But no, I think this will be a good practice to keep the train rolling down the track. Yeah.
Jerry, a project of this scope, what would you anticipate, what should the board be expecting as we move into the construction phase with change orders? And I know there were only a few of us on the board when we were wrapping up the elementary project, and what the percentage of change orders. Can you talk us through that, since we all have different experiences with construction up here?
Yeah, so there will be changes on this project. I mean, remember the stack of drawings we had? This is a very detailed, complex, complicated project, and we have humans that are putting it together, and they did a really good job of putting an excellent project together, but there are things that didn't get crossed, T's that might have not gotten crossed, or an I that didn't get dotted, so we will have changes. commonly we can expect to see change orders in the range of 2 to 4% of a project. At the elementaries, I think we were actually under 2% for design changes or problems that were overlooked or that where the T's didn't get crossed. And I think overall we're just slightly over 2% of change order percentage based on the construction costs at all 5 elementaries combined. So it's not an unusual thing, it's a regular type of a thing, but we've tried to set this process up such that we can address it on a monthly basis, and we'll keep it up. I think just based on the fact that there's 25 bid packages, one change could affect multiple bid packages. So it might seem a little bit overwhelming, but we're going to try and keep that up on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, to be able to bring change orders that'll be applied. We're also wanting to be able to vet them through the facilities committee, whether they're small changes or larger ones, so that we can get that approval, get the questions answered, get our details in place, and then take it to the subsequent school board meeting for approval. And that's going to keep the project just moving along and rolling. We've got, as I talked about in the meeting, we've got 50 months that we're working for, 50, not 15, but 50 months that we're going to be working on this project that we want to be able to kind of start that in a good direction and then be able to maintain that as we go through.
Any other questions or comments for Jerry on the change approval thresholds?
Right.
Thank you very much for the information. We appreciate it. Any comments from the public on the owner's representative's designation and change order thresholds? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to board committee updates.
So the facilities committee met a couple of times. As you can see in the board committee update documents, the meeting minutes are there, but something I wanted to point out to everybody, we had some extensive discussions in the last meeting about what type of reporting process we'd like to be coming to the board at a monthly cadence that's routine and in a common format. And there's an example in there of that shows not only the narrative of how the last month's been going, but also the budget tracking process with both summary and a breakdown down to each of the individual bid packets. If anybody has any feedback on that, let us know. We can take that through, but we wanted to bring that as soon as we could to show everybody what that would be like. Also, many of the items that are on the agenda tonight were discussed in some of those meetings, so I'm not going to touch on those. The Mitchell additions and remodel, for example, will be coming later. One thing I'd say for all the board members and public, the high school project's going well. The weather was great over the summer. Dean knows to the day the number of days it went without raining, and that was awesome for the project. Everybody can see there's a great big hole, and once in a while lately it fills with water for a little bit, but it drains great, so we're all good. Then we have some change orders that are coming up as an action item. As Jerry said, this will be the first of many. We are developing a rhythm of how those will be coming to the board and how they'll be described. Then one other kind of minor compared to the high school, but it is an issue that's nearer term. There was a discussion in the last facilities meeting. Jerry's looking for some additional bus space, so he's looking into various options for how near the facilities building we can have additional space for bus storage, because we need to have additional buses for the number of students we have right now. So he's looking into that, and you could probably expect there'll be some information coming at a future board meeting.
Other updates?
So we were trying to figure out the policy committee update, so we just did it, right? We just went through the policies. I see there is a tentative meeting for September 26th. Director Beerbaum and I were just like, is there a meeting on the 26th?
Well, I know. And so I had really thought, yes, we're going to be like, man, we're just going to rip through these. And then I was like more realistic and thought, this isn't going to work.
Okay.
So
there's
no.
not a meeting.
So we're going to cancel that. but I think the next one
The
is.
24th.
Yep.
We'll keep those. Okay,
Keep
all
it.
right, that's what I was thinking. Okay, so that's good. And then just a quick update on the Equity Committee. So the Equity Committee met on September 10th, and it was actually a really good meeting. We were in a conference room C, which is the big one, and I think there wasn't an empty room. So we had the full Equity Committee, we had representation from the administration, we had Officer Nick and Officer Schieffer and Officer Johnson attending, and we had some members of the community. It was a really good meeting. We focused on the SROs and the role of the SROs in our district. It was really, from my perspective, at least a really good opportunity to get data to kind of understand, at least from the perspective of the officers, about their experience in the school and what they believe they're doing there. And it was also the opportunity to figure out from the district side, what data we have and what data we need to start collecting. So it was a really good meeting. I can't remember I think Director Colton announced last board meeting that she was going to move into the co-facilitator role, so she'll be co-facilitating the Equity Committee meetings with Dr. Jones. She just couldn't be here tonight, and so I think we're waiting to hear from Director Colton and Dr. Jones what the meeting schedule is going to be. I know that you and Director Colton were going to get together and find a meeting rhythm, so we're waiting to hear when that next meeting is going to be.
Any other updates?
Sure. From the ISB Legislative Resolutions Committee, I'd like to report that from the survey that we handed in this summer, actually in particular, I think Director Benkin will appreciate this, the ISB staff took the input and then recommended three of the resolutions: healthcare, Resolution 7, the school funding, and then, of course, Supplemental 8. But what came in a very close fourth, or at least there was a clear separation from lots of resolutions, but one kind of stuck out in particular, was the preschool resolution. So there are a few of us that were on the committee that met in the end of August that said, you know what, let's recommend 4 to the assembly instead of just the 3. So we went ahead and did that, passed that through the committee. So when you go to the assembly and to the conference this fall, you'll see those 4 recommended to be the legislative priorities for next year.
Oh, that is amazing. What great news.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Anything else? Any comments from the public on our board committee reports? Seeing none, I will go ahead and move to the public forum. Caroline Westort. And this, pardon me, just a second. So as we've been talking about, we were working on a timer. Here it is.
There it is.
That's a timer.
That was a surprise.
But they have promised us that there will not be a really loud alarm that goes off when the time runs out. So, go ahead.
Good
Caroline.
evening. I'm Caroline Westward. I live at 1013 Murray Drive. I have 2 4th graders at Fellows Elementary and 1 6th grader at Ames Middle School. Here's a copy of my daughter Natalie's 3rd grade report card from last spring. All 3s. Any parent would be proud. I'm proud. Exceeds grade level, it says. This is consistent with what I see at home. She brings home all A's on her tests and assignments. All A's. Only 1 word wrong all year in spelling. Most tests, over 95% in math, many 100s in math only, 94%. A's on all projects she brings home. She says her schoolwork is often easy, especially math, which she finishes quickly, and is almost always asked to help other students, which she's good at, loves doing, and raises her confidence. At conferences, I'm told she's doing excellently, especially in math. It made sense to me, therefore, when the school included her for math science accelerated placement in the FLEX program. You see, Natalie has set a goal. She wants to be in compacted math in middle school like her sister. She likes math. She likes science, she likes computers, she spends her time with that stuff. Some kids want to score the winning touchdown for Iowa State football. Natalie wants to be in compacted math. Of course, I support it. This summer, she spent the summer doing this and this and this, 6th grade level. She drives, I support it. 4th grade started a month ago, similar pattern. She brings home 100% on her first Envision math unit test. She aces all 3 of her time test math facts first try. She reports she finishes her in-class math assignments in mere minutes. She works with and helps her partners on worksheets in class. Easy, she says. However, I've learned that easy quickly leads to bored, and we had a problem in 2nd grade where she was sitting in the bathroom stall waiting out lessons that were so boring she couldn't stand it. Teacher didn't notice for 2 months. 2 months. I learned about it late. Then we got her back into the flex services she needed to address that. Whew, I'm relieved. Except for that blip, she's been ID'd to be in the flex services program since kindergarten. I believe she needs those services. This fall, during mini conference time, I alert the teacher she's a high ability learner and will want to be challenged. To my surprise, a couple weeks ago, the fellow's ELP teacher very generously extended me the courtesy of calling me personally to say the currently available data, her words, on Natalie indicates she's a few points shy of qualifying for formal ELP designation, but she would be included in the Math Olympiad activities, she quickly adds, and the school offered differentiation exercises to keep her challenged in the classroom. Am I out of time?
Yes, I think that's what the gong is, so
Okay.
thank you very much for sharing your information.
I thought it was 4 minutes. Did it change to 3?
Do you have something in writing you wanted
I was going to say, if
to
you're going to
leave?
forward it or hand it to us.
My main purpose of coming was to show that there is this ident score, which is another report card that isn't shared with me, rendering this one meaningless. And it's secret, and I'm not supposed to know about it, and the good people at Fellows were told not to share it with me, and I think that's a wrong-headed policy, Dr. Dumas. And I think that I'm here to say that I want to get to the bottom of why I'm not being shown the data on my kid, because she's being excluded from necessary services as a result of them. So transparency is the only way to address bias that will breed in a secrecy-oriented environment. Bias like maybe the teacher doesn't like half Cuban kids like mine, or only place 2-parent kids in these services. I think transparency needs to be the policy going forward, and that's my main point, and I'll come back for another 3 minutes next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the consent items. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Rosser.
Nope, that's okay. It was in a different spot.
Okay.
So gifts to the district, Burke Family Foundation, Northminster Presbyterian Church, Gurdeep Bawiha, and Kathy and Corey Fitzgerald.
It's been moved by Benkin, seconded by Rosser to accept the consent items. All those in favor of English proficiency, allowable excess costs. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the request to the School Board Review Committee for modified allowable growth for limited English proficiency allowable cost in the amount of $442,192.77.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Perez. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Next item, modified allowable growth and supplemental aid for special education.
I move to approve the request for modified allowable growth and supplemental aid for the special education deficit for the 2018-19 fiscal year.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Rosser, discussion.
I think one of the things that I would want to point out is that we will continue to look at this. We're looking at our delivery model and doing some analysis on the way that our IEPs are written and what services our students are being provided. And we've been in a, I think, like many districts, and we heard it a little bit from United, where we hire EAs to work sometimes with our very most difficult students. And the research doesn't necessarily support that model. It's a popular model at times because there's a concept of more bodies in the room, more adults in the room. That's helps students and it's easier to manage. But I think that really when you look at learners that are challenged with disabilities, there's a different approach that is way more effective. And that's really about limiting the caseloads and having more certificated teachers who provide the direct service to our students who are experiencing the highest level of challenges. So that's really something I hope to move the district forward on. And I know that Darcy supports that. I know our executive directors support that as well. And so it takes a mind shift, and it's not one that we're not quite there yet, but we're moving in that direction, and I'm excited that we've taken some steps this year. One of the things that sometimes happens is that you begin down that path, and as you're changing, there's kind of a quick reaction to grab on to the past because that's what was comfortable. And so we're balancing that right now as we move and experience some of those growing pains, that we continue to push through those growing pains and try to get low caseloads that have certificated teachers delivering some of those services. Chris can give you the exact number, or Darcy, but we know that we are part of our deficit issue is the number of EAs that we have currently, and the insurance benefits that we provide, I believe. Chris, do you have that handy? We'll pull that up for you so that I believe, I can't remember off the top of my head.
So each year when I put the SES together, Carol and I have some intensive work to do to pull information together for the Medicaid portion of that report, because that determines the hourly rates that we're going to be reimbursed for Medicaid. And so I always kind of analyze that information in comparison to prior years. But one of the things that really struck me this year was that while we have salaries of $1.8 million for special ed EAs, we have health and dental expenses of almost $900,000, just $3,000 short. And while we have salaries of $3.7 million for teachers, we're at $480,000 for health and dental. So the amount of health and dental, and what that tells me is we have twice as many, more than twice as many EAs as we have teachers. So that number just really stuck out at me this year.
And in no way am I mean, there's still a need for EAs. I'm not diminishing what they do, but I also think there's a lot of power in certificated teachers and the knowledge and experience that they bring to the table. And so I really encourage us to continue to cut that cost, bring that cost back down as we work towards getting more certificated staff with some high-needs students.
So did the number of served students go up as well? Because, I mean, that's a pretty significant change in the deficit. That seems like there's some other things changing as well.
Yes, I mean, we definitely are serving more students. The needs of students that come to us sometimes are greater. And Darcy, do you have a microphone over there? We'll grab that. Or you can come up.
I'm pulling it up.
We are serving more students, and we're always a year behind in the money that we receive for students we're serving. So if we go way up one year, then, and count is the last Friday of October. So on the last Friday of October, we count all of the students that we have and turn that into the state, and then the next year is when we receive the money for those students. And so as we have to plan for the whole year. So as we hire staff, though our class list may not be maxed out, we know students are going to move in or become eligible throughout the year. So we have to have plenty of teachers in place in August to meet our needs throughout the year. We've had growth at the elementary level, and we also have, as you know, this year, a lot of moving around of classrooms, and so it's sometimes hard to predict exactly where we're going to need additional special ed teachers at the elementary level, and so we have to have plenty to provide the instruction to the students as they come to us. I've always been proud of this board and the philosophy of this district in the sense that we are going to meet all students' needs, and though we do have to look at our budget and we have to do everything we can, we also know that we have to provide for all students and that their needs are what drive our decisions.
So one of the things that I have to report up to the state on the SES is we have a screen on how many kids we counted, but then we also have to report on how many kids that we served at least one day, individual kids, distinct kids. So in the fall of 2018, I'm trying to get my years here. 2017, we would have counted 377 kids. In the 18-19 school year, we served 536 kids at least one day. So that kind of tells you how mobile that population is as well. And so that also, besides the fact, obviously we serve the kids because that's our role, but we don't always get to count them and get money for them either. So that also contributes to the deficit.
So Darcy, thank you so much, and I wholeheartely appreciate those comments and agree with you. I'm curious, in your perspective, how do other school districts handle special ed? Are we unique? I've always been told that we provide such great service that kids are coming from all over to be in our school district. And so the thing I'm worried about, I've seen this trend, and I appreciate what Superintendent Reisner is talking about maybe changing the way we do things. I'm just worried about the trajectory and how sustainable our community will be able to support special ed at this level.
We actually do not have many students come in, what I call through an IEP team decision, meaning a neighboring school district calls me up and says, if you have a program, our IEP team would like to meet and recommend Ames. People, would you like me to move up? Okay. People, I feel like I'm an announcer. People definitely move to Ames, within the boundaries, for the services I feel of our school district and our community. We have public transportation, we have child serve, we're a more diverse community, and we have an excellent school system. I had a conversation this morning with a school district where we did say no, and that is from one of those schools calling us and saying, we would like you to have one of our students. And I had to say our programs are full. We not only are many of our programs full, we can't say no to our own, so we always have to have space for students as they move into Ames or as they become eligible throughout the school year. Last week we said no, this week we've said no. There are certain, and I really don't want to get into anything that could be personally identifiable for students at the board table, but there are certain student needs. If we can meet their needs, I do want to say yes, because I never like the idea of a student being in a program of one in their little tiny school. So we do get to bill back individual costs, though our rate per day might not cover everything, but we do not have that many students that we make that decision and say yes. Now, if a student open enrolls to us as a gen ed student, they just, our open enrollment is up. They come to us as a kindergartner, and then in second grade, they get identified as needing special ed services. They're our student. We accepted them as a kindergartner, and they are now our student. We do bill back, and you'll see that in the report, that we bill back the home district for those services. And they bill us for students that are open enrolled into theirs that become eligible.
Thank you.
To put some numbers to those, this year we billed other school districts, not necessarily for the whole year, but for 138 students. That they may not have been here the whole year. We may not have counted them. They may have been, like you said, open enrolled as opposed to tuitioned in, while we paid other districts for 29 kids leaving us. So that gives you some perspective.
Any other comments or questions?
And we're allowed to bill for actual costs. So whatever it costs us to educate students that are open enrolled or tuitioned into us, we are allowed to bill that actual cost back to the districts.
Thank you.
Very high expenses is transportation, and you'll see that on there. Specialized transportation is very high. And I would like to compliment our teachers and associates for one way that we get some money back is through Medicaid, and we do an excellent job at Medicaid claims.
And your staff in
And my
here.
staff. I have 2 administrative assistants that they totally rock.
They're outstanding.
So we have a motion on the table. It was moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Rosser to request for the modified allowable growth. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Thank you. And thank you for answering all of our questions. We appreciate that. Next item, 28E agreements.
I move the board approve the 28E agreements with Woodward Granger Community School District for the Woodward Academy and Grandwood Consortiums for the 2019-20 school year.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Perez. Discussion.
If I might, this is kind of timely that these 2 items were on the agenda together. So one of the ways when a few years ago the state ruled that a lot of the providers that were providing special ed services to school districts were charging us for things that weren't allowable under the statute. One of the things that came about is a thing that school districts could enter and belong to consortiums. So Woodward Granger operates 2 consortiums, the Woodward Academy Day School and Grandwood. These consortiums work a little bit different. While they have to be day programs, they cannot be residential programs. They are not open enrolled or tuitioned to Grandwood or Woodward. There are students, we count them as our students. They don't show up on the special ed supplement. We pay them, so they would bill us for contracted service. So these particular consortiums work a little bit different. They don't work like that we've tuitioned a child to Woodward Granger into their regular special ed program. And one of the things with the consortium is that they're not only allowed to bill for actual special ed costs, they're allowed to capture general ed costs, which we're not allowed to do on tuitioned in or open enrolled students. So I just wanted to point out the difference on the consortiums versus, so we account for those kids as if we're educating them because we are a member of that consortium. So the students are in our student information system. I bill them to a facility for Woodward, not as tuition out, but they bill us for contracted services, they bill us for telephone, they bill us for postage, everything. I code those as if we were spending that ourselves.
Any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. New high school bid issuance number 2, swimming pool and equipment.
I move the board award the contract for bid package 13-1 swimming pool and equipment to Associated Pool Builders Incorporated in the amount of $3,245,000 for base bid and alternatives number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Rosser. Discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Item E, new high school change order number 1.
I move the board approve change order number 1 to Construct, Inc. in the amount of $38,626 for bid package number 31-1, site development for the new high school project.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion?
Well, this, after the action that we discussed earlier in the meeting, would be falling to that area where the superintendent would be able to just, because it's under $50,000.
But it would still come to
It's
the...
not timely, though.
Correct.
This one wasn't timely.
This
so-
wasn't necessarily to meet
So
that threshold.
we tried to be clear in the committee that if it's not timely, but it's under the limit, we still would like to see it come.
Okay.
So I would expect that something like this wouldn't actually have gone through that process. But would
But if
come
it
like
needed
this.
to, because
If
of
it
the timely
needed to,
nature of
then
it,
it could
then
have.
it would.
Yeah.
Okay.
All those in favor indicate... Do you want to say something?
Eric's going to pull up. One of the things we're talking about doing is doing an update on a monthly basis. And so that update, I attached it to the school board agenda. Just wanted to make sure that you'd had a chance to take a look at that and see what we have included in that. The other thing I didn't mention earlier that I remembered was that we have accounted in the budget for change orders. So we've got approximately $4,533,927 in our contingency for change orders.
12 cents.
No, I rounded it up. So what we'll do is, in our monthly meeting, we'll attach that with the facilities committee. Well, basically, it's a description of progress during the past month. And as you go ahead and scroll through that, it'll be a description with some pictures. We'll have a budget update, and if you kind of look, I cheated because the number's on there too, as far as what we're carrying on contingency. So we wanted to give you a high-level snapshot of what the current status of the project is. And then the last sheet is, this will be a summary of each of the bid packages with original contract amount, change orders that were approved today, plus pending change orders. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Yep, thank you for calling our attention to that.
Actually, I'm glad you did, because when I saw that, when we got our information for this meeting, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Is that something that can be put on the website for the community to kind of keep up to, for those that want to? I'm sure not everybody will, but just a thought.
It'll be a
Because
part of the meeting documents
part of the-
because we'll get it monthly. That'll be a part of the monthly report from the facilities
To the
committee.
facilities,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And Eric will continue his updates on the high school project, so, on the website. It's been moved by Benkin, seconded by Beerbaum to approve the new high school change order number 1. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Mitchell Elementary additions and remodel 2020.
I move the board approve the schematic design for construction of additions and renovation to Mitchell Elementary and authorize the architect to proceed with design development.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Perez. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Items from the board.
been a long meeting.
No, you've just been spoiled this summer.
I
because
have
they
been,
weren't so-
I know.
Because they weren't so long
They
this
have
summer,
been-
but it's
that's right.
back to school.
Anything? Nope, items from the superintendent.
I just wanted to say that Anthony and Jeff and I went to the Midwest and Plains Equity Conference. We wrote a proposal or a letter to get to go, and then we were on a waiting list, and we were able to get in. And I wanted to first thank Anthony for bringing this to us, because it was a game changer for me, and continues to just really push and pull at some really essential conversations for us to have as leaders. This training was around policy and leadership within a district, and I think we could all say that we were exhausted, excited, and just the position that Anthony has as our leader. I think bringing those things to us was wonderful. And I also want to thank the board for allowing me to attend, because it was just a phenomenal opportunity. And I know that it's going to have impact on our entire system. So thank you for that. And thank you to Anthony for bringing that to us.
Board planning calendar, anything that you want to highlight?
I wanted to just say that October 21st, we will have a board work session, and that board work session will be around purpose and priorities. I had originally put that for October, help me out, 7th? Is that a Monday?
Yeah.
7th. But needing to move that back, if there are any conflicts with the board, please let me know, and I will work on changing that as well. But we're really vetting a lot of this through our administrative work that we're doing, professional development work, and we're just not moving as quickly as we had anticipated. And so it's more important to get these things right than to be quick. So if that works for the board, that would be excellent. So it would be the 20... What did I?
Is that the night of a
21st.
meeting? So it's the same night?
It's the night of a meeting, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We will all check our calendars and get back to Superintendent Rice.
You doing before the meeting or after?
I was going to say, I think I would propose moving what do you feel as a board? What would you?
I would propose doing it after our meeting, but it depends on the agenda. For the
Now,
meeting.
last year, we sometimes moved our meeting up and did our meeting at 5:30 and then our work session right after that. But you let me know thoughts.
That worked well for me, moving our meeting up to like 5:30 and then doing that after.
I don't know I don't necessarily have a preference, but I do want to say, I recall you had that first meeting when we were all here, and that was a lot of people who were going to be here all night long, and so I just want to be mindful of the resources that would be demanded from the administration, the staff, to participate in a work session, unless you're thinking it's just us.
No, we were thinking it would be all of them, so I appreciate that feedback.
Would it make sense to have it on a different night? I mean, because we have it before the meeting. I agree with what Director Benkin's saying there. The issue is, I don't want to cut the discussion short to get to the meeting either.
Sure.
I mean, maybe that's something we could table and we could all talk back and forth.
We could move the board meeting back an hour.
Oh, yeah.
So,
How about we'll have some discussions,
Yeah.
maybe as board leadership, and provide maybe.
Perfect.
So if you have any thoughts on it, a preference with your schedule, please let us know. We'll have a discussion with Jenny about that.
Thank
Great.
you.
Great, thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
A second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Thank you very much.